What's going on, FA Nation? We are back with another episode of the 3-Point Play. I am Dan Malin, and I'm joined this week with James Grande. Grande, how are you?
Good, man. Good. Growing out a stash, having a kid, living the dream, really.
Yeah. How's the little one doing?
He is good. He is very good, very healthy. He is very big. Wearing a Derrick Rose shirt today. Shout out, my favorite Chicago Bull of all time.
That's your favorite Chicago Bull of all time?
Well, I mean, he, like Michael Jordan, I grew up on the tail end of Michael Jordan. Obviously, we can all be chalky and go Michael Jordan, right? I mean, I know you wouldn't because, I listened to you crap on The Last Dance, but that's for a whole nother story.
I just didn't like the documentary.
Yeah, I mean, Derrick Rose is that's my era of Bulls, like post-Jordan. I mean, from Jordan to Rose, there wasn't a lot to root for. So, Derrick Rose really brought the Bulls back. So, shout out to Orion for rocking. You're already telling me that he's already a Bulls fan at 4 months. It's pretty spectacular, Awesome. Way ahead of the curve.
Awesome. All right, so if you are unfamiliar with the format, James and I will debate 3 topics. We will each take opposing sides. We will each present 3 opinions or facts to support our side of the argument. So with that, our first argument is going to be something very near and dear to Grande's heart. If you don't follow him on Twitter, you really should, because he has been campaigning and championing for DraftKings to adapt boxing DFS. Now, he's going to argue why we should have boxing DFS. I'll take the other side. So, James, I will let you lead this one off.
Okay, so it's both DraftKings and FanDuel. I kind of laid off FanDuel off their throat a little bit and specify DraftKings because that's primarily where I play. But number one, Dan, I want you to I forget, what does DFS stand for?
Daily Fantasy Sports.
Sports. That is number one. If you go across the industry right now, FanDuel and DraftKings, right? We have sports, and then we have things that are not considered sports. And Dan, you actually do a write-up for one of those things.
I do.
It is the MTV The Challenge. Okay, that is currently a DFS offering. And I don't know about you, Dan, but I don't think I classify that as a sport.
Not.
We also have cooking over on FanDuel. We have wrestling. We have 4 different video games. And that's not even mentioning simulation sports. So first off, drafting or boxing is a sport. Second off, we have an infrastructure, and that's with MMA. Obviously, it's different because there are no kicks, there are no takedowns, but we have different forms of punches in boxing where, it's the same as MMA, but it could be scored different. We have jabs that could be scored the fewest because they're thrown the most. We have power punches that could be scored the most. We have tools at our disposal to figure out how many of each were thrown. CompuBox is, showed throughout a boxing match, and it is a website that you can go to and easily visit for all those statistics. So I think there's an infrastructure already in place with MMA. And I know collusion is going to be a key point of boxing, and everyone thinks boxing is colluded. But we're talking about wrestling as a DFS sport, for example. It's staged, and I know you're a wrestling guy, but it is a planned event going in. Everyone there, obviously they can pivot off things and whatever. There's collusion in MMA or unfair judging. We've seen unfair judging in MMA. How long? In 4 or 5 straight cards. I mean, I see Twitter exploding with people talking about boxing is unfair, but then MMA is the same thing. So I think collusion is I think it's a not valid argument because it's in every sport. I mean, referees ruin strike and balls calls and then a home run's hit, but people don't talk about that. Basketball, there is a poor James Harden takes 30 free throws a game. We don't talk about any type of collusion in NBA DFS. James Harden scores 65 actual because he has 30 points in the finish line. So I think my third point is collusion is in some form of every sport. There are bad referees in every sport. So I'm shooting that down before we even say it.
All right. Well, that actually was one of my points, but I'll still reiterate a little bit. But number one on why boxing should not be a DFS sport, and you did touch on it, is I'm not sure how they would score it. With other DFS formats, especially with MMA, you can score for takedowns, knockdowns, significant strikes, submissions. I mean, I am only under the impression that we can really only score for boxing the strikes and the wins, and maybe depending on when they score a knockout, like per round. I know that could possibly change. That's number one. Number two, boxing cards just aren't as deep as MMA, and MMA is sometimes we just get 10 fights per card, and that's usually pretty shallow. I saw that you had a wager alarm piece up for the Thursday night fights, and I was trying to find a full card for that, and I could really only find 2 fights on the whole thing. So I don't really know if with DFS contests and lineup building, I don't know how much variance we would get. And then number 3, I was going to say, like, it's a fairly corrupt sport. I mean, we've seen a lot of fights being fixed from, former IBF president Robert Lee taking bribes that he eventually went to jail for. Jake LaMotta in the 1940s was taking dives for the mob. I mean, this is just a sport where, like, it's had cheating. And I'm not saying MMA doesn't have cheating. There are guys that fail drug tests all the time. There's some sketchy scoring in that aspect as well. And my other issue with DraftKings and their MMA is, like, I don't really like DraftKings scoring of MMA fights.
Right.
So I'm not exactly sure that I would be a big fan of it either for boxing. But I think you bring some very good points. I mean, this was really an argument I wanted to present for you because I know this is something that you are very passionate about. And I'll be the devil's advocate, and I'll take the contrarian side. And I'm always cheering you on. Anytime I see you going at DraftKings, and because you bring up good points. It's like they have reality television contests. They've got video games that are contests, and the video game contests are actually filling up pretty well. But at the same time, it's like boxing is a sport. I think it deserves at least a chance. I'm just not sure we actually get to see it.
So to your point about the cards, especially like this week, like on Tuesday's card, there were 5 fights planned. A woman tested positive for COVID-19, so it was scratched, so there was 4 fights. And then they added 1, so it ended up being 5, could have been 6. Tonight, there are 4 because the 5th fight, a guy came in like 50 pounds overweight in the fight tonight. Clearly, enjoyed his quarantine and didn't train too much, but it would have been a 5-card fight. I don't disagree with depth of cards between MMA and boxing. It also is like, depth and excitement in MMA. Like even the lowest tier fight, the first fight of the night, it could end in like a kick to the face because someone jumped off a cage or did something crazy, and you're not going to get that with boxing.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And you're not going to get that in boxing, and I understand that. When boxing opens up and there are bigger cards and there is it's the same thing as MMA. There are prelims and then there's the main card. So I think when we're not in COVID-19 and also this is a top rank event only. So based on and I guess that's hard to base because there are promoters like a lot more promoters in boxing than any other sport, and Top Rank is literally using their fighters. Like it's their fighters, they're on ESPN. So it's a lot smaller pool to pick from, while there's still guys that are overseas because of COVID and they can't come over to the States and whatnot. So I think when the COVID, thing dies down a bit, because, we're still seeing so many cases, even though it's not being talked about, I think that we'll have deeper cards going forward. Now, I'm just saying, why don't we dip our toes in now, because see if it at least works, right? I mean, 5 fights, don't have these like massive tournaments like MMA just had its millie. I don't care for a millie. I don't care for anything like massive. Just give me like a $3.20 max that we could just test the waters in, and if it works, it works. I mean, there were 600. They peaked viewership Tuesday, 600,000 people. I guarantee 600, like out of 600,000 people, there would be a bunch interested in playing DFS, especially because I'm sure most of those 600,000, considering there wasn't a lot of big names, were already gambling on it anyway.
Yeah. Part of me actually wonders, because I know like MMA did have their Millie Maker last week, and then I threw a couple lineups into it, and obviously didn't do very well because it was a pretty tough card to read. But at the same time, that contest was a struggle for DraftKings to fill. Like they didn't have any overlay, but it also didn't fill either. And they were pushing the roster lock back, and so like I'm part of me is wondering if they're hesitant to expand to boxing simply because one of their biggest MMA contests that they've ever had failed to failed to actually like fill to capacity. So they took a little bit of a loss on it.
I mean, I definitely agree. Like, that's tough to then be like, hey, why don't we introduce another combat sport that's not as popular right now? But I mean, still, I mean, don't you like all these MMA guys, the fighters especially, are complaining about money. Nobody in boxing is complaining about money. No one in boxing has ever complained about money, and that's because there is, and this is another thing that I've been pushing. There's so much money still in boxing, whether people like it or not, whether people think it's popular or not. Boxing is reigns supreme in terms of financial, I mean, monetary gain. Think about Floyd Mayweather. He's the top earning athlete of like the last decade. Every single year, over Tiger Woods, over LeBron, like every athlete you can name.
And he only has to fight like once a year.
And he fights literally in May and September. And the thunder is roaring. As this is like the natural for me right now. Like, it just struck my house. The lightning just struck my house as I bring down the money argument, and I just think there is room, at least to right now, while we're playing cooking, like Bobby Flay at 10K. I'd rather pay like 10K for Shakur Stevenson boxing than pay for 10K Bobby Flay making a tortellini salad.
All right, I'll give you that one. You brought some really solid arguments. We will move on. The next couple of questions are a couple of hypotheticals. I'll kick off this one. If you could go back in time and prevent one NFL player from being procreated, who would it be? And mine is going to be Eli Manning. Now, if I could go back in time to Archie and Olivia when they had two little boys, Cooper and Peyton, and I could just sit them down and say, listen, Peyton's going to be arguably the greatest quarterback of all time. Cooper's going to go on to have a very successful career. He's not going to be an NFL player, but he's going to like be a firm at like an energy investment company. So he's going to do fine. You don't really need a third. If I could talk them out of making Eli, I would definitely do that. So number one, they've already got Cooper and Peyton. They don't need another, like why risk it? The kid could end up being a wet blanket. We know he's kind of not, but at the same time, like I just really want Eli to go away. So I would try and talk them out because they've already got two boys, two healthy boys, two growing boys. They don't need another. Number two, without Eli, the Patriots probably have a couple more Super Bowls. The Giants beat the Patriots twice in the Super Bowls, and I will always admit that helmet catch is arguably the greatest catch I've ever seen. Prior to Julian Edelman's catch against the Falcons, it was the greatest catch I'd ever seen. So without Eli, I'm in favor of the Patriots winning at least one more Super Bowl because I'm not even sure the Giants make it to the Super Bowl if they had gone with somehow landing actually Phillip Rivers. Number three, Eli Manning's Hall of Fame resume is always up for debate, and if he just didn't happen to exist or play football, then it wouldn't be anything to debate about. Ultimately, he's probably going to get in because the league, the qualifications for a quarterback to get in, like Joe Namath's he's in the Hall of Fame, and you look at quarterbacks now that have put up better numbers, and I understand it's a different time in the league, but ultimately I think with two Super Bowls, you kind of have to put Eli Manning in, even though he's just a mediocre football player. So that's kind of like, like I just wish that debate would go away because I think it's one of the dumbest debates in sports, like MJ versus LeBron. And then as an honorable mention, I think the only thing I would miss about Eli Manning would be the Manning faces. You can just Google search that and you'll just get a ton of great Eli faces, whether he's got clocked at like getting sacked and he's being helped up, or there's that infamous one where he's on the sidelines and he just took his helmet off and he's just like that's really the only thing I think I would miss about Eli Manning. But if I can make one NFL player, I'm not saying like I want to off him or kill him, like that's not all I'm saying. But if I had a time machine and I can just talk his parents out of making him, that's the one person I would do it for.
Elite. Dan, I'm sure you've seen that. I'm sure you've seen that spelled with the capital E-L-I and then T, lowercase t. Okay, just checking. So I kind of went in the same route, and I'm also going rival here. And I was going to go Deshaun Jackson. I could have went a bunch of different routes because I am, in fact, a Giants fan, and I do have the 2-0 edge on you, Dan Malin, in the Super Bowl. So shout out to Elite Manning. Elisha Manning is his actual first name. I'm going to go Jason Witten. And look, number one, he played for the Cowboys. And, I think there are few fans worse than Cowboys fans. And there are few things worse than being on Twitter throughout the years. And, Twitter's been around for a while. And just watching Jason Witten in a key game, catch a first down over the middle on like 3rd and 12 against the Giants. It just really bothers me. It's bothered me. And then going to Twitter and all these Cowboys fans, like the Patriots fans are worse. No offense, Dan. You're the Cowboys fans are a close second. So F the Cowboys, F Jason Witten. Number 2, he played 32 games against the Giants, 1,600 yards for a tight end. He scored 16 touchdowns, and he's caught 165 passes against the Giants throughout his career. For a tight end, again, this is not a receiver. Again, I could have went to Sean Jackson in the 2010, the game, the miracle at MetLife. That really still gets under my skin, everyone's skin. And then 3rd, Jason Witten. I think he was atrocious in the ESPN booth. And I think there was a reason why he came back to football.
He's very robotic.
He knew he was getting outed in ESPN, and he said, "Man, I really don't know what to do next because I definitely don't have a job here. So let me just go back to play football." And he wasn't very good. So I mean, I guess he was a decent fantasy producer, but I'm gonna go Jason Witten here. I definitely think Eli. I hold Eli very near and dear to my heart because I am a Giants fan. He did win me 2 Super Bowls. I was at 2007 or 2011. I went to the NFC Championship game out in San Francisco. Shout out Kyle Williams for fumbling 3 times. So that season especially was super amazing. I know you think the same. You guys were pretty good that year, 2011. But yeah, Jason Witten for me, and I totally disagree with your Eli call.
Yeah, but I think like the other thing I don't like about Eli was that he whined and complained to get out of playing in San Diego. I hated that. I know like John Elway did the same thing with the Colts. I never liked that about him. But Eli just like kind of used his dad to get out of playing for the Chargers.
I mean, that was also a family thing. I agree. Like, I do agree that was kind of like Bush League, and he's definitely, like you said, not the first, and he won't be the last to not want to play somewhere. But like, at that point, like, he's a college student. Archie's like, "You're not playing there." He's like, "All right, Dad. Like, you're like, you were pretty
He'll listen to his Hall of Fame quarterback.
Right. Like, you played pretty well in the NFL. Like, you know what you're talking about. So like, I agree. But also, like, then you learn who Eli is as a person. Like, I don't think he ever complained once, even when he was benched for Geno Smith, even when he was in his last year. I mean, he knew he was on his way out, but I don't think the guy complained once his whole career.
No, I mean, he's ultimately like a pretty solid team player and a good locker room guy. I'll give him that. He just kind of always annoyed me throughout his entire career. But FA Nation, let us know who you would want to possibly go back in time and force to not be procreated. Our last topic for today, one athlete. If you could pick any athlete, it cannot be LeBron James. This is the one stipulation that Grande and I had. If you could pick one athlete to cross over and play another sport, who would it be? I'll let you take the reins on this one.
So I think there are so many athletes, and we know there are many that have played other sports. Like most notably, Kyler Murray would probably be the first one that comes to my mind.
I thought about him, yeah.
I mean, especially how early he was drafted in baseball. Like, he could have probably shot through the ranks, right, and maybe made his debut this year in Oakland if there was a season. We could talk about Russell Wilson. I went off the board, and I went Ronald Acuna, and I would want him to play wide receiver in the NFL.
Okay.
So he's 6 feet, 180, and we have some notable wide receivers: OBJ, Jarvis Landry, Tyler Lockett, amongst a bunch that are 6 feet or shorter. So I don't think the height would be a problem. That's number one. Second, speed, Dan. Speed, more speed. This is a guy we're talking about 39 stolen bases. And, it's kind of like if we're getting Ronald Acuna on a go route compared to stealing a base, I mean, we have to get started, or, we get a little start. And once he gets started, I mean, he's stealing a base or he's going. And my third point, I would love to see him playing with Patrick Mahomes. Running a go route down the sidelines, and he's a good, I think it's a weird comparison, I guess, to compare hands in baseball and football, but like he's a pretty damn good defender,
He
and
is.
he has pretty good hands in the outfield. Put some gloves on him in the on the outside. Run a go route, Patrick Mahomes. Give me Ronald Acuna as a wide receiver for whoever team Patrick Mahomes plays for forever.
Okay. I'm actually going to also pick a guy that I would like to play wide receiver. And you may say that I'm cheating a little bit because I didn't necessarily take one of the big four athletes or like a big four sport athlete per se. But I went with Usain Bolt, just like the fastest man in the world. I mean, as curious as I am to see like how Tom Brady would have fared with the Montreal Expos, but like Usain Bolt is an absolute freak of nature. We've seen the speed. He ran the 100-meter dash in 9.58 seconds. I mean, like, I understand the speed translates a little bit differently when you have pads on, but I mean, he is the fastest human being that we've ever seen on the track. He's got the size to be an NFL receiver. He's 6'5", he's 207 pounds. He could probably use a little bit more muscle, but I mean, he's already got long, linking arms, so the catch radius is huge. And then lastly, you know, he's got the personality and the charisma to be the superstar and to be a superstar in the league. Like he markets himself. Like there's very little that really needs to be done. You know, and it's not to say like he's all about himself, but he just has an explosive personality. And I mean, like, can you imagine how cool it would have been to see like Bolt on the back of a jersey, especially if he played for the Chargers? Like that would have been awesome. So for me, like Usain Bolt, number one, he's got the speed. Number two, he's got the size. Number three, he just has the name and the personality to be a superstar in the NFL. FA Nation, let us know who you think you would like to see cross sports, play a different sport, whether it's, you know, a basketball player going to the NFL, a hockey player going to the NFL, or I don't know, maybe a basketball player going like lacing up the skates and going to the NHL. But let us know who you would like to see play a different sport. James Grande, thank you so much for your time. Check out his KBO DFS playbooks. I'm sure you'll be back on NBA DFS playbooks within a month or month and a half.
Yeah, they pushed it up a day, so like July 30th now instead of the 31st.
All right, be on the lookout. He's still writing content. He's providing MLB or baseball DFS in some regard. James, thank you so much for your time, brother.
Of course, brother. Anytime.